Welcome to The Real in Real Estate, your gateway to the source. I'm so glad you're here. We're all about diving into the nitty gritty of real estate, sharing insights, tips, and some awesome interviews straight from the industry's beating heart. From the latest trends to cool investment strategies, we've got you covered. Let's explore and uncover all the essential tools and knowledge you need for navigating the ever evolving world of property and housing. Here we go. Hi, welcome back to The Real in Real Estate, where we talk to the experts, get the facts, and dispel the myths. And today we're here with Chris Kelso once again. Chris is a mortgage broker extraordinaire, and we're going to talk about investing today. Welcome back, Chris.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me. And you're talking about a subject matter that I absolutely love.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I've always been told the fastest way or the best way to grow wealth is through real estate. We're both in the real estate business. I know we've talked before about, typical residential sales, but you have many, many programs that we've talked about in the past. Maybe we'll have time to get into those today also. But I wanted to talk about investing. So if people are wanting to build wealth and acquire property other than their primary residence, how can you help them?
So, there's a lot of different ways. First and foremost, I'm going to tell everybody, and thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful.
I'm going to tell, hopefully you're going to have an audience today also that is younger. And what I mean by that is that they're going to be able to start investing in real estate at a younger age. I think the one mistake that a lot of people who are big investors will tell you is they weren't given the advice to start investing at a younger age versus an older age, right? So the typical thing is, let me buy a home as a primary residency. Let me live in it a long time. Let me sell it and then buy another home and use that equity and put it into my new home. And let's go ahead and move up. And then you don't really think about buying an investment property until you're in your 40s or 50s. You're like, okay, I've got this extra money and I like to have some cash flow. Maybe I can get some more vacation time, etc. And I think what individuals need to start looking at is the younger you are that you can start making a purchase of your first home, and then maintaining that home as an investment property and buy your second primary and your third primary and your fourth primary, I think is one of the greatest strategies out there. And you can do that if you're a veteran. You can do that if you are a newly, employed individual. The reality is if I was to go back in time and redo my life again in real estate, I would have bought my first primary home in my early 20s, hopefully like 20 or 21.
Wow,
And
that is early.
Right. And I would have lived there for a couple of years. And then I would have saved up enough that I would have kept it as an investment property and bought a second primary home. And I would have done that. And then I would have kept that second home. And now we got two rental properties and bought a third primary home. Right. And that's one of the ways you create wealth through real estate investing is buying a home. And the reason why I say buy as a primary and live in it for a couple of years, number one is primary home lending is always better, right? So I can buy a primary home. I can put less money down. I get a better interest rate. I get lower mortgage insurance. But nothing says that after a year or 2 years, I can't buy up or move up. And so I do it's called the move up strategy, right? I'm always buying and then moving up after a couple of years. And in my wake, I'm keeping my rental properties. And so now I'm able to have those very little money out of my pocket. I have great financing because I finance as a primary residency. And now when I rent it, the principal is being paid for by somebody else.
Right.
And my cash flow is coming in being paid for by somebody else. Right. And it helps me offset my new purchase. Now, it has to fit your lifestyle. It has to fit your style. But that would be one of the best ways I would tell somebody if you're looking at investing and you're in the younger generation to start today. If you're not in that generation, there's also a great time to invest. Let's say you're in your 50s. Look at me. Right.
Now, right. I was going to ask that. It's not just for young people. It's for everybody.
It's not just for young people. Right. And I want to go on record. It's never too late to start investing in investment properties and real estate. It's just that I would highly encourage individuals who are younger to start earlier. Right. Because in my case, I can't go back and say, OK, great. Let me go back in time. I can think I can go back in time, but I can't do it anymore. So I have to invest with today's dollars and today's practice. Now, I was very fortunate. I've had over my time frame probably about 15 properties, and I have followed a combination of both strategies. I'll tell you probably my best story was I kept a property I bought in the energy corridor here in Houston for about 2 years. And when I moved out of it, I got a corporate rental from a big oil and gas company that rented it out for 7 years for me.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And big oil and gas was
Right.
paid absolutely great, et cetera, et cetera. And they ended up that the person that they were leasing it for, which was an executive, ended up moving out 2 years early. And they sent me a check for 2 years worth of rent and said, I'm releasing
Wow.
all obligations. And then I sold it, right? So
Wow.
it's never too late, but also the strategies I'm going to tell everybody are what I personally use as well. Okay. So then let's fast forward to where I am today. I still have a property right now that was my old primary residency that I am leasing out and eventually going to be selling as well. And I own my primary residency.
Mhm.
But if I'm an individual who just says, you know what, Chris, I want to invest. I don't care what age I am. I just want to be able to invest for my future. There's two things you always have to consider when you're investing. Number one is what strategy you're going to be investing on, right? And I say this because you have a strategy in which you can invest for equity, you can invest for cash flow, you can invest for long-term rentals, short-term rentals, flips. There's multiple investment strategies you can do. Let's simplify it on what they call an investment strategy for equity or an investment strategy for cash flow, right?
Right. Right.
So cash flow means is that I'm going to cash flow on a monthly basis, positive income that I can then take and hopefully leverage to live off of or to make other investments, et cetera. Whereas cash flow for equity is when I'm going to have my home probably break even, but I'm also accelerating the equity so that somebody else's rent is paying my equity faster.
Got
Okay.
it. Got it.
And so those are two things that I do. And the reason why I say this, I invest for equity, right? I would rather have my renter pay the mortgage that covers it, but I usually finance under a shorter term, a 20-year or a 15-year. So 100% of what they're paying is actually just accelerating my equity. So in the next 10 years, I have homes that are almost paid free and clear that I literally put less than 10% of equity into myself, right?
Great. Great.
And so
Great.
there's two different strategies. Number one, you have to look at, right? Number two is you also have to identify what you feel comfortable with, because here is the risk associated with investing, right? There's always a risk reward. And I'm one of those that talks about both sides.
Well, you need to. Absolutely.
You always need to. So when you buy a home, right, and you have somebody who's living in that home, well, you are now a landlord, right?
Yes. Yes,
And
you are.
so, so now let's say something breaks. Guess who repairs it? You do.
The landlord.
The landlord, right? Let's say somebody doesn't pay the monthly rent. Guess who still has to pay their mortgage?
The landlord.
The landlord. That is correct. So you have to understand is what do you feel comfortable with at the end of the day? Because if you say, man, I'm going to maximize, I'm going to go and buy a $500,000 home because I think that's a better market. But if that person ends up not being able to pay or something ends up breaking in a $500,000 home, the costs are a lot different than a $200,000
Yes.
home.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right.
You're still on the hook for it.
That is correct. So there's also a strategy. And I work with investors who invest in very high-end properties, in medium-end properties, and low-end properties. And the reality is it's a matter of risk. So the first thing as an investor you always want to do is, where does my risk stand? What do I feel comfortable with
yeah.
in taking on risk, right?
Yes.
And then once I define that risk, right, and the risk I'm going to define on a couple things like what price point I want to be in, how much money I want to put down, what market I necessarily want to rent in. It might be I might want to buy a property in the market I'm living in, or it might be I'm buying a property in a market I'm not living in. I've owned investment properties in other cities before. That's just the reality, right?
Okay.
A little bit more difficult, and you got to be a little more careful right there.
Right.
But it sort of depends on that strategy. And then that's when you have to really sit down then and say, okay, great. Now, what strategy am I going to do? Is it for cash flow or for equity? And then what am I going to be doing long term? And what can I do risk wise to maybe offset things? And which I have a lot of individuals now who look for, let's say, a duplex or a triplex.
I was just going to ask you about that. I've heard that that's becoming a very popular.
It is because now let's say I buy a duplex, and I can do this as a primary residency or as an investment property, either which one. But if I buy as a primary residency, I can live in one, have the other one leased out, and it's literally paying for what I'm living in. Or if I buy it as a true investment property, I have two renters that are bringing in money. And if one of them happens to do wrong or something go out, I still have money coming in on the other one.
Right.
So again, it's a matter of risk. I think there's always that risk that you have to take. So as an investor, my very first thing, and when clients come to me all the time, I ask them is, where do you stand risk wise? And what I mean by that is, what are you willing to take a risk on when it comes to price or payment or HOA or maintenance or one of 1,000 different things right there, so that you are put in a position to best succeed. Right
Right.
now,
What's what you're comfortable with
that,
financially.
that is correct. What you're comfortable with. Now there are a lot of different programs. Like I would highly suggest getting a property manager if you're going to be buying multiple properties. I think it's very important. I would
Yes.
highly suggest looking at a home warranty, because a home warranty you can get on investment property, and that might cover some of the larger items that might be out of pocket, generally speaking. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of ways you can also overcome, but those are also expenses at the very beginning you have to understand. Right. So if you're getting a property management company, well, that's an expense that's going to be going out on a monthly basis. You have to plan accordingly. If you're
Right.
getting a home warranty, you have to understand that's an upfront expense, generally speaking, that if when something breaks, you pay $50, they cover the rest potentially. But what does it cover, and how old is the home, and what types
Right.
of needs you think it might have, et cetera. So, like I said, investing to me, again, if I was to go back to my 20s, I would invest early. But if you're right now today, it's still a great time to invest in the market, because here's one thing I do tell everybody is real estate has never, ever, ever had a 7-year period in which has been a decline. You might have like this, but if I was to grab point A to point B, you're always going to have point B be higher in value than point A every 7 years. That is just,
Especially in our market, I think. We're very lucky here in Houston.
we are very lucky. And the other thing is that, unlike the ups and downs you have in the real estate, I mean, in the stock market or in the bond
Mhm.
market or as a trader, et cetera, real estate is a very stable investment. It's a tangible good. It's sitting on the ground. Yes, there are risks like anything else out there, but at the end of the day, I can turn around and sell that asset a lot easier than a lot of times I can selling a losing asset in the market, right?
Because you still
It,
have the house, you still have the land
you
to
still
keep,
have the
each
house, you
side.
still have the land, you still have a place you can go live if you needed to, worst case
Right.
scenario. So to me, real estate investing and is still the greatest form of wealth creation in the United States. It's also the greatest way to create a generational wealth where you can transfer that
Yes.
down over a period of time, which I think is very important to do. We have a lot of first generation families moving to the United States or living in the United States. And so imagine being able to pass down to your children and your children's children, those opportunities of land ownership, of home ownership. I
Right.
think is huge. And then let's look at this as well. Out of the top 20 billionaires in the United States, they all are heavily invested
In real
in,
estate.
in real estate, whether it be swaths of land, like farmland, et cetera, or actual multiple properties. But every person of wealth what will always tell you that their first major purchase they make over the majority of their wealth is always real estate. That is, why do you think you see so many very wealthy people live in $100 million properties, $50 million properties, $25 million properties? It's the safest bet to put your money if you're going to put it somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. And I just heard on the news, well, I'd heard this before, but I heard on the news this morning, I believe it was, that our younger segment, the millennials, I'm not sure they're the youngest one right now, but they're still young.
Yes.
Millennials are choosing to rent instead of purchase. And I'm really sad about that, not because I'm a real estate agent, but because they're not gaining equity, they're not gaining wealth. They're wanting to not have to worry about anything and just rent. So there's a huge rental market out there of millennials. So if you
Right.
want to get rental property, that's great. But from the aspect of actually having a millennial child, I'm very sad that they aren't looking more into purchasing and building that wealth.
Well, Rob Hahn, which is an individual who works for HAR, and we had a conversation years ago, and he said that the millennial generation was going to be the renter generation, right?
Yeah.
Now, it didn't prove necessarily to be the renter generation, because millennials actually, the past couple of years, have represented one of the largest segments of purchase. But what I do feel is that the average home buyer right now is 34 years old. The average first time home buyer is 34 years old. And if you go back to what I said at the very beginning of the segment, what
Right.
do I believe? I believe that you
20s.
have to be 24 years old buying your first home,
Right.
not 34 years old. But there's a lack of education, right? So if I was a 21-year-old and I graduated college, or I didn't graduate college, let's say I
Went
happen to be a steel
went to
worker,
work.
or I'm a welder, or I'm a plumber, or anything from that perspective. I'd be sitting down with somebody like me and saying, what do I have to do to buy my first home? How much money do I have to have down? What do I have to do, et cetera, et cetera? And I would work towards having that first home down, because home ownership does a couple of things. Number one, it creates pride. That's your home,
Absolutely.
right? And every time I make a monthly payment, I'm going to make a monthly payment whether I'm renting or owning my own home. The
So why
difference
not
is,
make that payment on your own property?
right, but why not have that ownership, that payment count towards you and your
Right.
end,
Right.
right? And then number three is, I will tell you, you can get kicked out like this when it comes to rent, but when it comes to home ownership, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, Ginnie, they have a lot of programs to keep you in the home for a very long time. That's why in the great debacle of 2008, you had people sometimes that would still be in their home a year later who hadn't made a payment. Now, is that right or wrong? I don't think it's right, obviously,
No.
but but it's a lot harder if you own a home to get kicked out of that home, because the government wants to keep you, and the government financing institutions want to keep you in that home and everything you can. Now, we don't want to put somebody in that position to begin with, right? But things happen. I mean, who would have thought that in 2020 COVID hit, and then people lost their jobs and were out jobs, but the government stepped in and made sure that all those individuals who couldn't pay their monthly mortgage payment had a
Right.
sort of a stay, and then everyone went through that. That's why we didn't have a lot of foreclosure. We really have no foreclosures even today, right now, right? And
Nothing
so,
like we did before in
no,
2008.
not like 2009, 2010,
Right.
2011, right? When it was just, there was thousands of them a day. No, we're not talking about a year. We're talking about thousands a day. And so that's the reason why average homeowner is 34 years old. First time homebuyer is 34 years old. And we need to do a better job of educating the newer generation, the millennials, and then the new generation come about them. Something I do for my kids, why home ownership at a young age is very important, right?
Well, and I think I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's very important that the young people are not intimidated about talking to a lender or talking to a mortgage broker. Like you said, find out now what it is you need to do today to get to where you want to be a homeowner. You're going to talk to anybody, answer their questions, and that's what they need to do, gather that information.
It really is, and I think the worst form of information is misinformation, right?
Absolutely.
Or a lack of information. And I think the internet, for as good as what it is, it also can be very detrimental to people, right? I mean, the biggest, I was just on a phone call just now, and everyone's saying, oh, I think you need to wait till interest rates go down. But there's an inverse effect to home prices and interest rates, right? So when
Absolutely.
interest rates are moving up, home prices are stabling. When rates are moving down, home prices move up. And so I tell everybody all the time is, do you know what impacts your monthly payment more? Is it the rate, or is it the price of acquisition? It's the price of acquisition. What impacts your future wealth more? And it is the price of acquisition,
Right.
right, over a period of time. So if I wait, so let's assume that today's rate's a 6.5, and I want to wait till it goes to 5.5. By the time I go and I'm buying a $400,000 home, by the time that rate goes down to 4.5, that $400,000 home is now worth 420. That's $20,000 in equity that has disappeared from me if I had bought it at 400,000.
Right.
And the problem with that is I've got to make up that equity by, I got a lower interest rate, but it's a harder makeup for me to make up that 20,000 over that period of time. And so that's why I tell everybody all the time is, don't look at rate as being a deciding factor. Look at lifestyle, right? Are you moving up? Are you moving down? Are you in a strong rental market? Can you buy a duplex or a quadplex? There's lifestyle changes are what you should define your home ownership on, not where today's rate stands. The reality is the rate has very little to do with where you have to live. You got to live somewhere, right?
Right.
You're going to live with your parents. You're going to live with friends. You're going to rent. You're going to own, or you're going to live, on the street, right? But you got to have a place to live. And the worst option is the one on the street,
Well,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So you have to have those options out there. And that's why I say is then maximize the opportunities you have when you have the opportunity to have to pay something.
Right. Someone told me one time, you don't make your money when you sell the house. You make your money when you buy the house,
Buy the
because
house.
you buy smart.
That's always the case. So I'll give you my best story and my worst story in my case. So,
Okay. Here we go.
so when I bought my very first home here in the United States, it was over off of Derry Ashford. I never forget it. I thought we got a great deal at $155,000, right? So we bought
Right.
this home $155,000, about a 2,000 square foot home. and lived in it for 8 years. And when I went to go sell, I mean, actually not 8 years, a little less than that, probably about 7 years. And when I went to go sell it, the most I could sell it for was $160,000. And the reason why is the market had changed. At that time, all of the bedrooms were upstairs, right? And
Yes.
everybody, all of a sudden, at that time frame, everybody wanted a master bedroom downstairs. So it took me a year to sell it. Sold it for
Wow.
$5,000 more than I bought it. However, I had all that equity built up over that 7 year period. So even though I bought it for 155 and sold it for 160, I only owed about 110 on it.
So you made
Right.
a nice profit.
So I made profit on it. So it wasn't like I was renting and then lost everything. But I made money off that because it was my home.
Right.
Right. It was my home that I invested my capital into, and I was able to recover that capital out over that period of time. Right. And
Absolutely.
so that was one I look at and say, okay, great. I didn't lose money, but I didn't make money on appreciation. Right. Now, where's my best one? My best one was a home that I bought for $550,000 that sold for a little over 1.2 million. Okay.
Wow.
And I bought it at the right time. I bought it in 2008 in the crash of the market
Right.
and sold it in 2021, 20, in 2020 at the height of the market. Right now, could I have known that I was buying at the low and the high? No, because it's impossible to know. Right.
Right.
But I took advantage of buying an inventory home back then, and took advantage of selling my home in 2000 at the end of 2020 when the market was at an all-time high. And so those are opportunities you always have to be aware of and available for. I also am a big believer that your home is not an asset until it's paid free and clear, and or it's something that you're doing from an investment perspective. So my primary home, I've always said the following: my primary home, I look at it as a liability that I can move and shake and sell and buy a new one if I need to, because that's how you make money. You don't make money by by holding onto your home and paying the whole thing off for a period of time. You make money by making that money make you more money. So then that's the second thing about investing is a lot of people say, well, Chris, I've got this home and I've got my primary home. It's paid free and clear, but I don't have any money to buy a new home. I sit there and say,
Yes,
well,
you
what,
do.
what if I could show you how you pull money out of your existing property,
Yeah.
buy an investment property, right? And now you're going to have a renter in that property and you're going to be cash flowing really good. And that's going to be paying off that cash out that you did and or the line of credit that you did. And now I can show you how you start making money. Money doesn't make money when it's not invested. That's just the reality. Money sitting there by itself does you no good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It feels good to know you've got $200,000 in the bank, but it's not making you any money.
No.
But I can show you how that $200,000 in the bank, if you had 200,000, how you could probably buy, let's say, 4 investment properties, worst case scenario, and make that $200,000 earn you $200,000 a year just by putting it to work for you. And so that's the thing: is smart people understand how money works. Money does not work by sitting in your bank account. Money works by rotation. And in fact, a lot of your financial advisors all talk about this as well. It's what's the churn on your money? How are you churning your money? How are you rotating it? Right? Stagnant sitting in your bank doesn't do any good. But if I'm rotating it, if I've got it invested, if I'm getting money back out of it, if I'm receiving accounts receivable, and if I am putting that back in to whether it be that asset and or another asset, that's how you make money. That's how millionaires become billionaires, and billionaires hopefully become trillionaires, and people have nothing become millionaires. Is by rotating money. You have to rotate money.
Okay. So not only can you help someone get a loan, you can also direct them how to build their wealth.
Well, I think part of what I talk about all the time is I'm not. I don't want to use a traditional mortgage guy. A mortgage guy just says, "Hey, here's the transaction, take it or leave it." Right? I've always said the following: I want to help somebody achieve their dreams, and their dreams could be just owning a home. Their dreams could be owning multiple homes. It could be buying an investment property on the lake. It could be buying a 50 unit rental a complex. The reality is that it goes a lot further than just that. And so one of the things I always said is, well, I'm more of a mortgage financial consultant. It's also about leveraging the following. I showed a good friend of mine. He was having children. Here's another way to leverage property. And this is not about investing, but it is pretty cool. He said, "Hey, Chris, I'm about to have some kids, and what do I need to do, et cetera, et cetera. And so I said, well, instead of investing in a 529 plan, what if I could show you to do the following? You've got a good home. Let's set this up under a 15-year fixed, right? And by the time your children are at the age, about that, when rates were at like 2% at the time, 2.5%. By the time your kids are at the age of college, you're going to have a home that's paid free and clear, right? And so that home is paid free and clear. Are you going to planning on staying here? Well, he goes, no, once the kids are out, we're gone. So then you sell that home, and that becomes what were you hoping to save up? Well, I want to give each one of my children $50,000. I said, great. So by the time this is over with, you'll have a home that's $500,000 that's paid free and clear, $400,000 plus your appreciation. So worst case scenario, you've paid it off in 15 years. You don't have a mortgage payment. You can go buy whatever you want to. That same $500,000 home that he's in the process of selling right now is selling for about $900,000. Okay.
That'll pay for college.
Yeah. So now he's got his college funds that are paid for his children. Okay. And he has a new home he's going to be buying in cash. He said, Chris, I'm sorry. Now I'm convincing him not to buy the home in cash, by the way, because my thing is, hey, why don't we show you to put 50% down, take the other 50% and rotate your money.
And build some more.
And so that's another conversation we're having. But those are things to do. So a lot of times also understanding financing is not just about what your monthly payment is. It's about what are you looking at doing in the future? How can I show you the right financing that might be able to supplement a 529 plan? How can I show you financing that might be able to set up, long-term care for you in the future? How can I show you a financing program that can, eventually have mom and dad come live with you and leverage something like that? It's about understanding individuals and their lifestyles and what they're looking at doing in the future. It's not just about the number and me getting a mortgage out the door.
Okay, so I'm going to have to make an appointment with you and come talk about my own personal, and everybody else out there should too. This is very, very interesting. Well, we don't have a lot of time left, Chris. I'd like to talk about this further in the future about different things you can offer investors as far as getting started, the actual loans and the loan process. And I know you mentioned VA, and there's all kinds of products out there that can help you buy that second home or that land or whatever it is you want. But in the meantime, tell us how to get a hold of you. How can people reach you?
Absolutely. So you can always reach me on my cell phone, 713-256-9138. You can also email me. My email is super easy. It's Chris, which is CHRIS.Kelso, KELSO @rate.com, just like it says, rate.com.
Perfect. Okay. Any last words you want to give us here before we sign off?
I think I love your show as always. I can't wait to share this as well. Thank you very much. And I would just say to all of our listeners, grab this and share this video. If anything, I don't care anything, just share the video to somebody you think that needs to hear these words. If they need to sit down with me or somebody else, have them do so. But don't be ignorant and don't put your head in the sand about not understanding about real estate investing and how it can truly create a generational wealth for you and your immediate family, but also the generation to come. And
please, if you have questions out there, contact Chris. You're going to say, I don't have enough money to buy a house yet. Talk to Chris. He'll tell you what you need, exactly what you need, how to get there, when to get there. He's always willing to answer questions. So please don't think you're too young or too poor. Contact him. He'll help you figure it out. Right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thanks again, Chris, so much for coming on.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Bye, Chris.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to The Real in Real Estate, your gateway to the source. Be sure not to miss our upcoming episodes loaded with fantastic insights, expert tips, and all the latest trends in the property scene. Don't forget to stay connected with us on our Trilogy Realty Group socials, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and even TikTok. Until next time, take care.